The Veltharian exploration ship moved through the dark space between stars like a silver knife cutting through black cloth. Captain Zexathai stood on the bridge watching the stars slowly drift past the viewing screen. His four arms worked the control panels with practiced ease, while his large purple eyes scanned the data flowing across the displays. The ship had been traveling for 6 months, searching for new worlds to study. The Veltharian Empire was always looking for planets that might hold life or resources. Most of the time, they found nothing but empty rocks floating in space. Sometimes they found the remains of dead civilizations that had destroyed themselves long ago. Science Officer Veltarin approached the captain with excitement in his voice. His antennae were twitching the way they always did when he discovered something interesting. He held a data pad in his thin fingers, and his eyes were wide with surprise. "Captain, we are picking up energy readings from the next system," Veltarin said. "The patterns are very strange. They do not match anything in our databases." Zexathai turned to look at his science officer. In all their years of exploration, they had seen many different types of energy signatures. Most came from natural sources, like stars or gas clouds. Some came from ancient machines left behind by extinct species. But Veltarin looked like he had never seen anything like this before. "Show me the readings," the captain ordered. Veltarin activated the main display screen. Colorful lines and numbers filled the view. The energy patterns looked chaotic and unorganized. They seemed to pulse and change in ways that made no sense according to Veltharian science. "The energy output is very low but very complex," Veltarin explained. "It appears to be coming from the third planet in the system. The patterns suggest some kind of technology, but not any technology we know." Captain Zexathai studied the display for several minutes. His military training told him to be careful when approaching unknown technology. It could be dangerous or it could be a trap, but his curiosity as an explorer made him want to investigate. "Set course for the third planet," he ordered. "But keep our weapons ready and stay alert." The ship changed direction and began moving toward the planet. As they got closer, the energy readings became stronger and more complex. Soon, they could see the planet itself on their screens. It was mostly brown and gray with small patches of green and blue. The atmosphere looked thin, and the surface appeared harsh and rocky. "Captain, I am detecting artificial structures on the surface," the sensor operator called out. "They appear to be settlements of some kind." Zexathai felt his heart begin to beat faster. Finding intelligent life was always exciting but also dangerous. Many species in the galaxy were hostile to strangers. Others were so advanced that contact with them could be deadly for the Veltharians. "Can you identify the species responsible for these structures?" he asked. Veltarin worked at his console for several minutes before looking up with confusion. "The architectural patterns are not in our database. The technology appears to be a mixture of advanced and primitive components. It is very strange." As the ship moved into orbit around the planet, they could see more details of the surface. There were indeed settlements scattered across one continent. The buildings looked like they had been built from salvaged materials. Some structures were clearly made from metal that had been taken from spacecraft. Others looked like they had been constructed from local materials. "Captain, we are receiving a transmission," the communications officer announced. "It is in an unknown language, but the signal pattern suggests it is a greeting or warning." Zexathai considered his options. Standard Veltharian protocol required him to observe unknown species from a distance and report back to the Empire before making contact. But the energy reading suggested these beings were not advanced enough to be a threat to his ship. "Open a channel and transmit our standard peaceful contact message," he decided. "Use multiple frequencies and include mathematical sequences to show our intelligence." The communications officer worked at his station for several minutes. Then, a new voice came through the speakers. It was speaking in a language none of them had ever heard before. The voice sounded calm and measured. "Captain, our translation computers are working on the language," Veltarin reported. "Initial analysis suggests the beings are called humans. According to our historical databases, humans were declared extinct over 300 years ago when their home world was destroyed. Zexthai felt shock run through his body. Humans were legendary throughout the galaxy. They had been known for their aggressive expansion and reckless behavior before their extinction. Most species considered their destruction to be inevitable, given their dangerous nature. "Are you certain these are humans?" he asked. "The language patterns match archived human communications," Veltarin confirmed. "But this should be impossible. All human worlds were destroyed or abandoned centuries ago." The captain stared at the planet below them. If these really were humans, then this discovery would change everything the galaxy thought it knew about the extinct species. He had to learn more about how they had survived and what they had built on this remote world. "Prepare a landing party," he ordered. "We are going to make contact." Commander Jake Sullivan stood in the command center of New Haven Colony, watching the alien ship in orbit above their world. The ship was beautiful and sleek, unlike anything the humans had ever built. Its smooth curves and glowing hull made their own makeshift buildings look rough and primitive in comparison. Jake was a tall man with gray hair and steady hands that never shook even in the most dangerous situations. He had been a soldier before the colony ship crashed on this world 30 years ago. Now he was responsible for protecting 12,000 human survivors who had made this harsh planet their home. "Sir, the alien ship is requesting permission to land," reported Lisa Martinez from the communications station. She was an older woman, with kind eyes who had helped establish the colony's first government. Her voice was calm, but Jake could hear the worry underneath. "What do we know about them?" Jake asked Dr. Kira Thompson, who was studying the readings from their sensors. Kira was a brilliant scientist who had helped design many of the systems that kept the colony alive. She had short brown hair and wore the practical clothes that all colonists preferred. Her fingers moved quickly across the control panel as she analyzed the data. "Their technology is far beyond ours," she said, "but their communications seem peaceful. They have been very patient and have not made any threatening moves." Jake looked around the command center at the faces of his people. These men and women had survived impossible odds to build a life on this world. They had faced deadly storms, equipment failures, and food shortages, but they had never faced contact with an alien species. "What does the council think?" he asked. "Lisa." "The council voted to allow them to land," Lisa replied, "but only a small group and only at the main landing pad where we can watch them closely." Jake nodded. The colony had always made decisions together. Even in dangerous situations like this one, they took time to discuss and vote. It was one of the things that made them strong as a community. "Send them coordinates for landing pad 3, Jake ordered. "Tell them they can bring no more than 5 individuals and no weapons." The alien ship sent back a message of agreement. Within an hour, a small shuttlecraft descended from the larger vessel. It landed gracefully on the metal platform that the colonists had built from salvaged materials. The shuttle was as beautiful as the mothership, with flowing lines and no visible joints or seams. Jake led a small group to meet the aliens. Kira came with him along with Sam Rodriguez, the chief engineer, and Dr. Alex Morgan, who specialized in environmental systems. They all wore their best clothes, but even their finest garments looked worn and patched compared to the gleaming alien shuttle. The shuttle door opened with a soft hiss, and 3 beings stepped out. They were tall and thin with purple skin and 4 arms each. Their large eyes seemed to take in everything around them with careful attention. They moved with grace and confidence, but showed no signs of aggression. The leader of the aliens stepped forward and spoke in accented but clear English. "I am Captain Zexthai of the Veltharian exploration vessel Quantum Dawn. We come in peace seeking knowledge and understanding." Jake stepped forward and extended his hand in the traditional human greeting. The alien captain looked at the offered hand for a moment, then reached out with one of his 4 arms to clasp it gently. "I am Commander Jake Sullivan of New Haven Colony," Jake said. "Welcome to our world." The other aliens introduced themselves as Science Officer Veltarin and Dr. Yith Ellen, their cultural specialist. All three seemed fascinated by everything they saw around them. Their eyes constantly moved from the buildings to the equipment to the humans themselves. "We must ask," Captain Zexthai said carefully. "Are you truly human beings? Our records indicate that your species became extinct over 300 years ago." "We are human," Jake confirmed. "Our ancestors came here when Earth was destroyed. We have been on this world for 3 generations, building our colony." Dr. Yithelen spoke up with excitement in her voice. "This is remarkable. How did you survive? This planet appears to be very hostile to life." Kira stepped forward to answer. "We adapted and improvised. We used everything we had from our original ships to terraform parts of the planet. It was not easy, but we found ways to make it work." The aliens looked around at the colony with new interest. What had seemed like primitive construction now looked like creative problem-solving. The buildings made from ship hulls were not just crude shelters, but clever use of available materials. "May we see more of your settlement?" Veltarin asked. "We would very much like to understand how you accomplished this." Jake looked at his companions and saw agreement in their eyes. These aliens seemed genuinely curious rather than threatening. Their questions were respectful and their manner was polite. "We would be happy to show you around," Jake said, "but I should warn you that what we have built here is not pretty or advanced. We did what we had to do to survive." Captain Zexthai made a gesture that might have been the equivalent of a smile. "Commander Sullivan, survival itself is the most advanced technology of all. We would be honored to learn from you." As they began walking toward the main settlement, Jake felt a strange mixture of pride and nervousness. These aliens represented civilizations that spanned the galaxy while the humans were just one small colony on a remote world. But they seemed impressed by what the colonists had accomplished. The tour began at the agricultural domes where the colonists grew their food. The structures were built from salvaged metal and plastic with improvised atmospheric controls. They looked rough, but they worked perfectly to protect the crops from the harsh environment outside. The aliens asked many questions about how the systems functioned and how the colonists had designed them. With each answer, their expressions showed more amazement and respect. Dr. Kira Thompson led the 3 Veltharian visitors through the heart of New Haven Colony. The aliens followed closely behind her, asking questions about everything they saw. Their 4 eyes seemed to record every detail while their voices carried tones of amazement and confusion. The first stop was the water processing plant that cleaned and recycled every drop of moisture on the planet. The facility was built inside the hull of the original colony ship that had brought the humans to this world. Massive pipes and filters filled the cramped space, while indicator lights blinked steadily, showing that all systems were working properly. "This is impossible," Science Officer Veltarin said as he studied the machinery. "These components should have failed decades ago. The stress loads are far beyond their design specifications." Sam Rodriguez grinned as he patted one of the large pumps with obvious affection. He was a stocky man with grease-stained hands and the kind of smile that came from fixing things that everyone else said could not be fixed. "This old girl has been running for 28 years without stopping," Sam said proudly. "We rebuild her piece by piece whenever something breaks down. She has probably been completely replaced 3 times over, but she just keeps going." Dr. Yithelen examined the connections between different systems. The cultural specialist seemed particularly interested in how the humans had combined technology from different sources. "Your repair methods do not follow any standard engineering protocols. How do you know these modifications will work?" "We test them and see what happens," Sam replied with a shrug. "If something breaks, we fix it again. If it works, we leave it alone until it stops working." The aliens exchanged glances that suggested this approach was completely foreign to their way of thinking. Captain Zexthai asked to see the maintenance records for the facility. Sam laughed and pointed to his head. "Most of it is up here," Sam said. "We write down the important stuff, But there is too much to record everything. Each person knows their own systems, and we share knowledge when we need to. The next destination was the Atmospheric Processing Center, where the colonists slowly converted the toxic air of the planet into something humans could breathe. The facility was built into a natural cave system that provided protection from the violent storms that regularly swept across the surface. The processing equipment filled several large caverns connected by tunnels that the colonists had carved themselves. The air hummed with the constant sound of fans and filters working to clean the atmosphere. Green plants grew in special chambers, adding oxygen while removing harmful gases. The efficiency of this system is remarkable, Veltaran said as he took readings with his instruments. You are processing the entire atmosphere of this region using equipment that should only work in small enclosed spaces. Kira nodded as she checked the status displays. We connected 18 separate atmospheric processors in parallel. Each one handles a small area, but together they create a breathable zone that covers our entire settlement. But the power requirements must be enormous, Dr. Ythelen observed. How do you generate enough energy to run all of this? Alex Morgan answered from where he was adjusting one of the control panels. He was a quiet man who understood the environmental systems better than anyone else in the colony. His gentle manner hid the fact that he had solved some of the most difficult technical challenges the colonists faced. We use solar collectors during the day and geothermal energy at night, Alex explained. We also recover waste heat from all our other systems and feed it back into the power grid. Nothing gets wasted. The aliens seemed impressed by the integrated design, but also puzzled by the unconventional approach. Their own technology apparently followed more rigid rules and standards. The tour continued to the food production areas where the colonists had created artificial ecosystems inside protective domes. Earth plants grew alongside native species that had been carefully modified to be safe for human consumption. Fish swam in artificial ponds, while chickens and rabbits lived in climate-controlled shelters. This biodiversity should be unstable, Veltaran said as he watched children feeding the animals. Mixing species from different worlds usually results in ecological collapse. It took us 15 years to get it right, Kira admitted. We lost a lot of crops and animals learning what worked and what did not, but we kept trying different combinations until we found ones that supported each other. Dr. Ythelen was particularly fascinated by the social aspects of the colony. She watched as people of all ages worked together on various tasks without any obvious hierarchy or rigid assignments. How do you coordinate all these activities? She asked. We see no central control system or management structure, Lisa Martinez answered as she joined the group. As a member of the ruling council, she understood the social systems that held the colony together. Everyone knows what needs to be done, and people do what they are good at. If there is a problem, we discuss it and figure out a solution together. But what if people disagree or refuse to work? Dr. Ythelen pressed. Then we talk until we find a way forward, Lisa said simply. We cannot afford to have people who do not contribute, but we also cannot afford to force people to do things they hate. So we find compromise. Captain Zexathai had been quiet for most of the tour, but now he spoke with obvious confusion in his voice. Your methods appear to violate many fundamental principles of engineering and social organization. Yet your colony is clearly successful. How do you explain this contradiction? Jake Sullivan, who had been listening to the conversation, spoke up. We do what works. If the textbooks say something is impossible but we need it to work anyway, we ignore the textbooks and try it. Sometimes we fail, but sometimes we succeed. And when you fail? Zexthai asked. We learn from the failure and try something else, Jake replied. Giving up is not an option when giving up means everyone dies. The aliens looked at each other with expressions that suggested they were beginning to understand something important about humans. These people did not follow rules or protocols. They followed results. That evening, the three Veltharian visitors sat with the Human Leadership Council in the main meeting hall of New Haven Colony. The hall was built from salvaged ship plating and lit by efficient LED panels that cast a warm glow over the simple furniture. Lisa Martinez served tea made from local plants, while the others settled into chairs that had been crafted by hand from native wood. Captain Zexthai set down his cup and looked around the room with curiosity. "We would very much like to understand how your colony came to exist. Our records show that all human worlds were destroyed or abandoned centuries ago." Lisa nodded and settled back in her chair. As the eldest member of the council, she had lived through most of the colony's history. Her voice carried the weight of years, but also the strength that came from surviving the impossible. "The story begins with Captain Noah Blake and the colony ship Terra's Hope," she said. "Noah was not supposed to be a colonial leader. He was just a transport captain moving families from one human world to another when everything changed." She paused to sip her tea while the aliens listened intently. Even the other humans in the room paid attention, because Lisa told the story differently, each time focusing on details that seemed important for the current situation. "The war between humans and the Xerion Empire was going badly," Lisa continued. "Human worlds were falling one by one, and refugee ships were fleeing in all directions. Noah's ship was carrying 800 families when word came that Earth itself had been destroyed." Dr. Yethalin leaned forward with interest. "What did Captain Blake do when he received this news?" "He gathered everyone together and told them the truth," Lisa replied. "He said that humanity as they knew it was probably finished. All the human governments were gone and most of the colony worlds were under attack. They were on their own with nowhere safe to go." The Veltharians exchanged glances. In their culture, such a situation would have led to despair and surrender. But Lisa's voice suggested that something very different had happened. "The families had a choice," Lisa went on. "They could try to find another human settlement and hope it was still safe, or they could find an empty world and try to build something new. Most of the families voted to find a new home, even though they knew it would be dangerous." Sam Rodriguez spoke up from his place near the back of the room. "My parents were on that ship. They always said that Noah gave them hope when everything seemed hopeless." Lisa smiled at the memory. "Noah was good at that. He had a way of making people believe that impossible things were possible if they worked hard enough." She continued the story, explaining how the Terra's Hope had traveled for months looking for a suitable world. They found planets that were too hot or too cold, or had atmospheres that would kill humans immediately. Some worlds had dangerous predators or unstable geology that made settlement impossible. "Finally, they found this world," Lisa said. "It was not perfect, but it was not immediately lethal either. The atmosphere was toxic but breathable with the right equipment. The soil was poor but could be improved. There was water and minerals and enough sunlight to support life." Captain Zexthai looked puzzled. "But surely your people realize that establishing a colony on such a marginal world would be extremely difficult. Why did they not continue searching for a better option?" Lisa's expression grew serious. "Because the ship was dying. The engines were failing and life support was breaking down. They had maybe a few weeks before critical systems would stop working completely. It was this world or no world at all." The aliens seemed to understand the desperate nature of the situation. But what came next clearly surprised them. "Noah made a decision that most species would consider insane," Lisa said. "Instead of trying to preserve the ship as long as possible, he ordered it to be completely dismantled." "He destroyed your only means of escape?" Veltarin asked with shock. "He used it to build our future," Lisa corrected. "The ship's hull became the frames for our first buildings. The engines became power plants. The life support systems became the foundation for our atmospheric processors. Even the furniture and wall panels were recycled into tools and equipment." Dr. Yethalin shook her head in amazement. "This approach seems extremely risky. What if the colony had failed? Your people would have had no way to leave." "That was exactly the point," Jake Sullivan said. Noah knew that people would work harder to make the colony succeed if they had no other choice. Fear of failure can be a powerful motivator when it is combined with determination to survive. Lisa continued the story, describing the early years of struggle and hardship. The first winter had been brutal, with storms that damaged the temporary shelters and killed some of the crops. Many people had wanted to give up, but Noah had convinced them to keep trying. He always said that humans were at their best when things looked worst, Lisa remembered. He believed that our species had survived for thousands of years because we never accepted defeat, even when defeat seemed certain. The Veltharians learned about the gradual expansion of the colony as more land was cleared and more systems came online. They heard about the innovations and experiments that had led to the current prosperity. But they also heard about the failures and setbacks that had cost lives and resources. The most important thing Noah taught us was that perfection was not the goal, Lisa said. The goal was progress. As long as we were moving forward, we were winning, even if we were moving slowly. Captain HFY was quiet for a long moment before speaking. In our culture, we plan extensively before beginning any major project. We study all possibilities and calculate all risks. Only when we are certain of success do we proceed. "And how often do you succeed?" Jake asked. "Nearly always," HFY replied. "But we also accomplish much less than we might if we were willing to accept greater risks." Lisa smiled. "Noah used to say that the biggest risk was not taking any risks at all. He said that species who played it safe would never discover what they were truly capable of achieving." 3 days into the Veltharian visit, the colony's early warning systems began screaming alerts throughout New Haven. Dr. Alex Morgan rushed into the command center with his tablet showing readings that made everyone's hearts race with fear. The numbers on his screen were higher than anything they had ever recorded before. "We have a massive solar storm incoming," Alex announced to the room full of worried faces. "The electromagnetic pulse will hit us in approximately 18 hours. The intensity is off our measurement scales." Jake Sullivan studied the data while his mind calculated the potential damage. Solar storms were a constant threat on this world because the planet's magnetic field was weak and provided little natural protection. But this storm was different from anything they had faced before. "How bad will it be?" Jake asked, though he already suspected the answer would not be good. "Bad enough to destroy every piece of electronic equipment on the planet," Alex replied, grimly. "Our atmospheric processors will fail. The power grid will be fried. Even hardened military electronics won't survive this kind of electromagnetic bombardment." The command center fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. Without their technology, the colony would be unable to process air or water or grow food. The hostile environment that they had fought for 30 years to control would reclaim their world within weeks. Captain HFY, who had been observing the humans during their crisis, spoke up with genuine concern. "Our ship is equipped with advanced shielding that will protect us from the storm. We can evacuate your entire population to safety." The offer was generous and practical. The Veltharian vessel was large enough to carry all 12,000 colonists away from the danger. They could be transported to any world in the galaxy where they would be safe from the approaching disaster. But Jake looked around the command center and saw determination rather than relief on the faces of his people. These were not people who ran from danger when there was any possibility of fighting back. "We appreciate the offer," Jake said carefully, "but this is our home. If there is any way to protect it, we have to try." The Veltharian captain seemed genuinely puzzled by the response. "Commander Sullivan, your technology cannot withstand this storm. Even if some equipment survives, the damage will be so extensive that your colony will not be viable." "Maybe," Jake agreed, "but we have 18 hours to figure out a solution. That is more time than Noah Blake had when he decided to build this place." Dr. Kira Thompson was already working at her computer terminal running calculations and pulling up technical specifications. Her fingers moved rapidly across the keyboard, while her mind raced through possibilities that seemed impossible but might somehow work. "There might be a way," she said without looking up from her screen. "It would require us to sacrifice most of our remaining ship components, but we could build an electromagnetic shield grid around the settlement." Alex Morgan moved to look over her shoulder at the complex diagrams appearing on her display. "The power requirements would be enormous. We would need to drain our entire energy reserve and then some." "We still have 3 fusion reactors from the original ships," Sam Rodriguez pointed out. "They have been sitting in storage because we never needed that much power before. If we brought them all online simultaneously, we might generate enough energy." Science Officer Veltaran studied the human plans with his advanced instruments. After several minutes, he looked up with an expression of disbelief. "This design has numerous flaws and violation of safety protocols. The probability of catastrophic failure is extremely high." "What is the probability of success?" Jake asked. Veltaran hesitated before answering. "Perhaps 30% under optimal conditions. More likely 15% given the time constraints and available resources." The humans looked at each other, and Jake could see the same thought in everyone's eyes. 15% was not good odds, but it was better than 0%, which is what they would have if they gave up. 15% is enough, Jake decided. "We have beaten worse odds before." Dr. Yithelen seemed fascinated by the human reaction to the crisis. "In our culture, such low probability of success would be considered unacceptable. Most species would choose evacuation over such a risky plan. Most species probably never had to build a civilization from the wreckage of a single ship," Lisa Martinez observed. "We learned a long time ago that acceptable odds are whatever odds you have to work with." The next several hours became a frenzy of activity as the entire colony mobilized for the largest engineering project they had ever attempted. Teams of workers began dismantling equipment that had kept them alive for decades. The precious components were loaded onto vehicles and transported to positions around the settlement. The Veltharian visitors watched in amazement as children helped carry tools, while elderly colonists offered advice from their years of experience. No one was assigned specific tasks, but somehow everyone found ways to contribute to the effort. "Your people are working without central coordination," Captain Zexathai observed. "How do they know what needs to be done?" "They know because they have to know," Jake replied as he helped load a heavy power coupling onto a transport. "When failure means everyone dies, people find ways to make success happen." The alien captain shook his head in wonder. "Your species approaches impossible challenges with remarkable optimism. Do you truly believe this plan will work?" Jake paused in his work to consider the question seriously. Around him, he could see his people working with the focused intensity that had built their civilization from nothing. They were afraid, but they were not paralyzed by fear. "I believe that we will do everything we can to make it work," Jake said finally. "Whether it actually works or not is something we will find out together." As the hours passed, the electromagnetic shield generators began taking shape around the colony. The devices looked crude and improvised compared to Veltharian technology, but they represented the best that human ingenuity could accomplish with limited time and resources. The solar storm hit New Haven Colony exactly when Alex Morgan's calculations predicted it would. The first electromagnetic pulses arrived like invisible hammers striking everything electronic on the planet's surface. In the command center, the humans and their Veltharian guests watched the shield generators power up just as the deadly radiation reached them. The electromagnetic field created by the human-built devices shimmered in the air like heat waves rising from hot pavement. The shield was not perfect, and gaps appeared in several locations where the coverage was too thin, but most of the settlement remained protected as the storm raged overhead. "Shield strength is holding at 60%, Alex reported from his monitoring station. "Power consumption is higher than projected, but still within acceptable limits." Jake Sullivan stood at the main control panel watching displays that showed the status of every system in the colony. Red warning lights blinked constantly as various pieces of equipment struggled to handle the electromagnetic interference, but the critical systems remained online and functional. "How long will the storm last?" he asked. "Another 14 hours at this intensity," Alex replied. "Then it should begin to weaken gradually over the following 6 hours." Captain Zexthai monitored the situation with his own instruments. The Veltharian devices showed details that the human equipment could not detect. "Your shield is deflecting approximately 85% of the electromagnetic radiation. That is a remarkable achievement given the improvised nature of your defenses." Science Officer Velteran seemed equally impressed. "The harmonic frequencies generated by your field generators are creating interference patterns that enhance the overall effectiveness. This appears to be accidental, but it is actually improving your protection." Sam Rodriguez grinned from where he was adjusting the power flow to the shield network. "Sometimes being lucky is better than being smart." "I do not think this is luck," Dr. Ythelen observed. "Your people seem to have an intuitive understanding of how to make different systems work together even when the individual components are inadequate." As the hours passed, the strain on the colony's power systems became increasingly severe. The 3 fusion reactors were running at maximum output, but the shield generators demanded more energy than had been anticipated. Alex worked constantly to balance the load and prevent any single component from overloading. "We are going to have to shut down non-essential systems," he announced. "Life support in the unused sections, agricultural lighting in domes 7 through 12, and water processing for the industrial areas." Jake nodded his approval. These were difficult decisions that would cause problems later, but they were necessary to keep the shields operational. The colonists had learned long ago that sometimes you had to sacrifice the future to survive the present. "Sir, we have a problem with Generator 4, called out one of the technicians from across the room. "The power coupling is overheating and we are getting fluctuations in the field strength." Sam immediately headed for the door. "I will take a team out there and see what we can do." "The electromagnetic radiation outside the shields is lethal," Velteran warned. "Organic beings cannot survive more than a few minutes of exposure." "Then we will work fast," Sam replied without hesitation. The Veltharians watched in amazement as Sam and 3 other humans put on radiation suits and ventured outside into the deadly storm. The suits were improvised affairs built from materials that had never been designed for this kind of protection, but they provided enough shielding for the humans to work for short periods. Through the external cameras, everyone in the command center could see the repair teams struggling with the damaged equipment. The electromagnetic pulses made their movements clumsy and their tools unpredictable. But they kept working even as their radiation detectors screamed warnings. "They are receiving dangerous levels of exposure," Dr. Ythelen said with concern. "They should return to safety immediately." "They will come back when the job is done," Jake said calmly. "That is what humans do." 20 minutes later, the repair team returned to the safety of the shielded area. Their radiation suits were smoking and their faces were pale with exhaustion. But the power coupling was working again and Generator 4 was back online at full strength. "How do they know the risk was acceptable?" Captain Zexthai asked. "The radiation exposure could cause serious health problems later." "They know the risk," Jake confirmed. "But they also know that without that generator, the entire shield network might fail. 12,000 people would die in the next few hours versus 4 people who might get sick in the coming years. The choice is obvious." The Veltharian captain struggled to understand the human logic. In his culture, such individual sacrifice for group benefit was rare. Most species valued personal safety over collective survival when the two came into conflict. As the storm continued, the colonists faced one crisis after another. A power surge damaged the control systems for Dome 6. A lightning strike overloaded the backup generators. The water recycling plant developed leaks that threatened to contaminate the supply. But each time a problem arose, people stepped forward to solve it. They worked with tools that were inadequate and in conditions that were dangerous. They improvised solutions that should not have worked but somehow did work. They supported each other through expertise and encouragement and sheer, stubborn determination. "Your people are remarkable," Dr. Yithelen said, as she watched a grandmother teaching children how to repair electronic circuits while the storm raged outside. "They treat this crisis as if it were simply another day's work. For us, it is another day's work," Lisa Martinez replied. "We have been facing impossible challenges for 30 years. This one is bigger than most, but the approach is the same." "And that approach is?" the Veltharian cultural specialist asked. "Do whatever it takes to keep everyone alive," Lisa said simply. "Everything else is just details." As the 18th hour approached, the solar storm finally began to weaken. The electromagnetic pulses became less frequent and less intense. The shield generators that had been straining at maximum capacity for nearly a full day finally began to show stable readings. "Storm intensity is dropping below critical levels," Alex announced with relief in his voice. "We can begin powering down the emergency systems." Throughout the command center, people began to smile and laugh as the tension of the crisis finally started to fade. They had done the impossible once again, and their home was safe. In the aftermath of the solar storm, the three Veltharian visitors found themselves looking at the human colony with completely different eyes. What had seemed like primitive improvisation now appeared to be something far more sophisticated. The humans had not just survived an impossible challenge, but had done so while maintaining their community and their hope for the future. Captain Zexthai stood with Jake Sullivan on the observation deck looking out over New Haven as the colonists began the work of repairing storm damage. People were already replacing damaged equipment and checking systems that had been stressed beyond their design limits. There was no celebration or rest, despite their remarkable victory. "Your people seem to treat survival as a routine matter," the Veltharian captain observed. "Do they not understand how remarkable their achievement was?" Jake smiled as he watched. "Children helping their parents carry tools to repair sites. They understand that yesterday's impossible task is just today's job that needs to be done. If we spent time celebrating every time we beat the odds, we would never get anything else accomplished." "But surely they deserve recognition for what they have achieved here," Zexathai pressed. "Your entire civilization should know about this colony and learn from your example." "Maybe," Jake agreed. "But first we need to make sure the colony continues to thrive. Success is not something you achieve once and then keep forever. It is something you have to earn again every single day." In another part of the settlement, Science Officer Vel Taran was working with Dr. Kira Thompson to analyze the data from the storm. The readings showed details about human engineering that challenged everything the Veltharian scientist thought he knew about technology and design. "Your electromagnetic shields should have failed within the first hour," Veltaran said as he studied the power consumption graphs. The harmonic resonance patterns were completely unstable and the energy distribution was highly irregular. Kira looked at the same data and shrugged. "But they did not fail. The shields did exactly what we needed them to do for exactly as long as we needed them to work." "That appears to be accidental rather than intentional," Veltaran pointed out. "Your calculations contained numerous errors and your equipment specifications were inadequate." "The calculations were estimates based on incomplete information," Kira corrected. "We knew they were probably wrong, but they were the best we could do with the time we had. So we built the shields anyway and adjusted them as we learned more." The Veltharian scientist struggled to understand this approach. In his culture, extensive planning and precise calculations were required before any major project could begin. The idea of building something while knowing that the design was flawed seemed reckless beyond comprehension. "What if your adjustments had not worked?" he asked. "What if the shields had failed anyway?" "Then we would have tried something else," Kira replied. "Or we would have died trying. But giving up without attempting a solution was never an option." Meanwhile, Dr. Yethelin was conducting interviews with colonists of all ages, trying to understand the social dynamics that made their community function. She spoke with farmers and engineers and teachers and children. Each conversation revealed more about the unique human approach to cooperation and survival. The most fascinating aspect is the absence of rigid hierarchy, she explained to her colleagues later. Leadership appears to be situational based on expertise and necessity, rather than formal authority. How do they resolve conflicts without clear command structure? Captain Zexthai asked. They discuss issues until consensus emerges, Dr. Yethelin replied. But the discussion is always focused on practical solutions rather than abstract principles. They seem to value results over ideology. The three Veltharians spent several more days observing the humans and learning about their methods. They watched Sam Rodriguez teach young engineers how to repair equipment that was far beyond its intended lifespan. They observed Lisa Martinez mediating disputes between different work groups. They saw Alex Morgan designing improvements to systems that had been built from salvaged materials. Every challenge becomes an opportunity for innovation, Veltarin noted. When their equipment fails, they do not simply replace it. They rebuild it better than it was before. And when they face problems that have no obvious solution, they try multiple approaches simultaneously, Dr. Yethelin added. If one method fails, they immediately switch to another without wasting time on regret or blame. Captain Zexthai found himself most impressed by the human attitude toward failure and risk. The colonists acknowledged that many of their attempts would not succeed, but they continued trying anyway because occasional success was better than certain defeat. They seem to understand something about survival that we have forgotten, he said. Progress requires risk, and risk requires accepting the possibility of failure. On their final day at the colony, the Veltharians were invited to attend a council, meeting where important decisions were made about future projects. The humans were planning to expand their settlement and build new facilities that would support a larger population. We want to establish a second site in the northern mountains, Jake explained. The mineral deposits there could provide materials for manufacturing that we cannot produce here. The aliens studied the proposal and immediately saw problems. The northern region was even more hostile than the current location with extreme weather and unstable geology. Establishing a settlement there would require massive resources and involve enormous risks. The probability of success appears to be very low, Veltarin said diplomatically. Perhaps you should focus on improving your current facilities rather than expanding to more dangerous areas. Jake smiled and looked around the room at his fellow council members. 30 years ago, the probability of success for this colony was also very low. But here we are anyway. Yes, but you had no choice. Then, Dr. Yethelin pointed out, now you have a stable community and safe living conditions. Why risk everything on another uncertain venture? Because standing still is not really an option for humans, Lisa Martinez answered. We need to keep growing and learning and building, or we start to die inside. Safety is not enough if safety means never trying to become something better. The Veltharians realized that they were witnessing something fundamental about human nature. These people were not satisfied with mere survival. They needed to strive and struggle and reach for goals that seemed impossible. It was this drive that had brought them across the galaxy and built a civilization from nothing. When will you begin this northern expansion? Captain Zexthai asked. Planning starts next month, Jake replied. We should have people on site within a year if everything goes well. And if everything does not go well? Veltarin asked. Jake's smile grew wider. Then we will figure out how to make it work anyway. That is what humans do. The departure of the Veltharian ship from New Haven Colony marked the beginning of changes that would ripple across the entire galaxy. Captain Zexthai and his crew carried with them not just scientific data and cultural observations, but a completely new understanding of what was possible when intelligent beings refused to accept limitations. 3 months after returning to Veltharian space, Captain Zexthai stood before the High Council presenting his report on the human colony. The assembled leaders listened with growing amazement as he described the impossible achievements of 12,000 survivors on a hostile world. These humans have accomplished more with limited resources than most civilizations achieve with unlimited support, HFY told the council. They have redefined what we consider possible in terms of survival and adaptation. The council members asked many questions about human technology and social organization, but what interested them most was the human approach to problem solving and risk management. The idea that failure could be acceptable if it led to eventual success was revolutionary to Veltharian thinking. "What do you recommend regarding future contact with this human colony?" asked the council chairman. "I recommend that we establish a permanent research station in their system," HFY replied. "We have much to learn from them about innovation and adaptation. Their methods could help us solve problems that have challenged our civilization for centuries." Science officer Veltaran was already working with Veltharian engineers to apply human principles to their own technology. The rigid design standards that had served them well for thousands of years were being questioned for the first time. Some projects that had been abandoned as too risky were being reconsidered. "The humans show us that acceptable performance under difficult conditions is often better than perfect performance under ideal conditions," Veltaran explained to his colleagues. "We have been so focused on eliminating failure that we have also eliminated many opportunities for breakthrough success." Dr. Ythelen published papers about human social organization that became widely read throughout the galaxy. Her descriptions of a society that functioned without rigid hierarchy or extensive bureaucracy challenged fundamental assumptions about governance and cooperation. Humans appear to have discovered a form of social organization that combines individual freedom with collective responsibility, she wrote. Their ability to work together toward common goals without coercion or extensive regulation suggests new possibilities for interspecies cooperation. News of the human colony spread beyond Veltharian space as diplomatic communications carried the story to other civilizations. The Alterian Federation requested detailed reports about human engineering methods. The Christek Collective wanted to understand how humans had achieved stable social cooperation. Even the reclusive Mindari Enclave expressed interest in human approaches to environmental adaptation. Within a year of the Veltharian visit, New Haven Colony was receiving delegations from dozens of different species. Each group came seeking to understand how humans had accomplished what their own civilizations considered impossible. Jake Sullivan found himself hosting alien visitors almost constantly as word of the colony continued to spread. Each species brought their own perspectives and questions, but all were fascinated by the same fundamental aspects of human behavior. "They all want to know the secret," Jake explained to Lisa Martinez as they prepared for another delegation. "They think there must be some special technique or technology that explains how we survive here." "What do you tell them?" Lisa asked. "The truth," Jake replied, "that there is no secret. We just do whatever it takes to keep moving forward, and we never give up even when giving up would be easier." Some alien civilizations tried to copy human methods directly, but found that their own cultures were too rigid to adapt effectively. Others began gradual reforms that incorporated human principles of flexibility and innovation. A few species discovered that they had always possessed these capabilities but had been discouraged from using them by social conventions. The most significant change came from an unexpected source: the Xerian Empire that had destroyed Earth and driven humanity to near extinction was struggling with internal rebellions and economic collapse. Their rigid military hierarchy was proving inadequate for governing diverse civilian populations across hundreds of worlds. When Xerion leaders learned about the human colony, they initially dismissed it as irrelevant to their problems. But as reports continued to arrive, describing human achievements, their attitude began to change. They realized that the species they had tried to exterminate possessed knowledge that could help save their empire. A secret Xerion delegation arrived at New Haven 5 years after the first Veltharian contact. The aliens came not as conquerors, but as students hoping to learn from the people they had once tried to destroy. "We made a terrible mistake," the Zerion ambassador admitted to Jake during their first meeting. "We destroyed Earth because we saw humans as a threat to galactic stability, but now we understand that human adaptability could have been the solution to many of our problems." Jake listened to the aliens' words without anger or resentment. The colonists had moved beyond hatred for their former enemies because hatred was an emotion they could not afford if they wanted to survive and thrive. "The past cannot be changed," Jake said simply. "But the future can be influenced by what we choose to do today." The Zerion delegation spent months studying human social and economic systems. They were particularly interested in how humans maintained morale and cooperation during extended periods of hardship. Their own species tended toward despair and conflict when faced with serious challenges. Humans seemed to draw strength from adversity rather than being weakened by it, observed the Zerion social scientist. "When conditions become more difficult, your people work harder and more effectively. Difficult conditions force us to be creative," Kira Thompson explained. "When we have unlimited resources, we can afford to be wasteful and inefficient. When resources are scarce, we must find better ways to accomplish our goals." The knowledge gained from studying the human colony began to transform civilizations across the galaxy. Engineering standards were revised to emphasize adaptability over perfection. Social systems were reformed to encourage innovation rather than conformity. Military doctrines were updated to value flexibility and improvisation alongside traditional tactics. But perhaps the most important change was in how different species viewed the relationship between risk and progress. The human example showed that civilizations could achieve remarkable things by accepting uncertainty and embracing the possibility of failure as a path to eventual success. 10 years after the first contact, New Haven Colony had become a pilgrimage destination for beings from across the galaxy who wanted to understand the human approach to survival and achievement. The colonists found themselves accidentally serving as teachers and inspirations for civilizations that spanned star systems. "We never intended to change the galaxy," Jake reflected as he watched another alien shuttle land at the expanded spaceport. "We just wanted to build a home where humans could survive and prosper." "But that is exactly why you succeeded in changing everything," Captain Zexathai replied during one of his regular visits. "You focused on practical goals rather than grand ambitions. You showed the galaxy that impossible things become possible when people care more about results than recognition." The story of New Haven Colony continued to spread as more species learned about human achievements and began applying human principles to their own challenges. The galaxy would never be the same because a small group of survivors had refused to accept defeat and had chosen to build something beautiful from the wreckage of their past.